time for Wednesday's hour number 2 on Hashtag Daily K with your host, Peter Bint. Korean dramas, movies, and even lyrics. Why is the world paying attention to Korean stories?
From classics to modern masterpieces, time to dig deep into the charms of Korean literature.
On Check It Out
with Paul.
It's Wednesday, it's book day. Check it out. Check a book out of the library. Check meaning book in Korean. Paul is here. I got a big dose of nostalgia. Is it nostalgia, deja vu, maybe both of them together in this studio? How have you enjoyed the Chuseok holidays?
It's been a bit quiet this year, with COVID and social distancing. We've been staying at home, so it's just been my wife, myself, the cats, some good food.
Do they do
TV.
anything Chuseok-y, the cats themselves?
Well, one of them vomited.
That's lovely. That's a lovely Chuseok vomit, as you always wish for. Today's story, anything to do with housewives, homemakers, house husbands? Any links?
Well, not so much homemakers, but certainly to do with family. We've got a fascinating story. And it's one of the big hitters of Korean literature. It's the second time I think we're featuring him.
Okay.
And he is absolutely brilliant. His name is Yi Mun-yol, and we're looking at a book called Meeting with My Brother, 아우와의 만남.
That's, I think, a different word for brother than we use commonly these days. Right?
Well, it's a different kind of brother. It's a brother from another mother, but with the same father.
Okay.
One's from the south, one's from the north.
Oh, literally North Korea?
Yes.
Oh.
So it's a fascinating story. It's translated by Heinz Insu Fenkl with Yoosup Chang, and it's really fascinating.
Oh, is it a modern tale, a modern book?
Well, it's set in the mid-90s, so relatively modern, but certainly of its time and a little bit autobiographical.
Oh, okay. So then tell us about his autobiography as an introduction to the author, if we forget from last time we featured him.
Yes, Yi Mun-yol, born in 1948 in Seoul. His father ran off to North Korea when he was just a child.
Oh, dear.
And this is where the autobiographical part of the story comes in. His family ended up moving to the countryside. He actually suffered a lot because he was the son of a quote-unquote political offender.
Yes,
because,
if he defected, right?
Yeah, so because of his father, he was stigmatized. He dropped out of university. He failed the bar exam 3 times.
Oh, dear.
He wrote and wrote, but he kept losing at numerous literary contests.
Oh, dear.
Ended up teaching at a private institute. But then in 1977... he finally got a little bit of attention for the short stories he was writing. He started winning prizes, he started getting published, and then he sold something like over 30 million books.
Not a bad career.
Not at all. He's chair professor at Hanguk University of Foreign Studies. He is very well respected here in Korea and around the world. A number of his novels and short stories have been published in English. This one, Son of Man, Our Twisted Hero, Pylon's Pig. If you talk about Korean literature, you have to mention Yi Mun-yol.
Absolutely. And that's such an interesting aspect of this book and of his life as well, defecting to the north. You often wonder that, right? Usually the other way around nowadays, because you don't hear of any cases, well, many cases. There are the odd one, right, where someone tries to venture into North Korea.
It does happen occasionally.
There's a very strange tale, what was that, last year or the year before, of someone on a boat trying to do that, apparently. But the other way round, I often wonder, when it's a lone person from a family, what are the consequences for the family left behind, right?
Well, this is the thing, and this is what the story explores. The damage done by the father and the effect on both families, not just the one in the south, but the one in the north.
That's very interesting. The translator, we have featured Heinz before.
Yes, Heinz Insu Fenkl, this is our second time. Born in 1960, raised in 3 different countries, Korea, Germany, and the USA. He studied at Vassar College, then the University of California, and then became a Fulbright scholar in Korea. Now he's an associate professor of English at the State University of New York at New Paltz. And he's taught all around, including at Yonsei University. He's won a couple of prizes for his contributions to Korean literature, and he's not only a translator, but he's also a writer, editor, and folklorist. He's even published 2 novels himself, and we featured him before with The Nine-Cloud Dream by Kim Man-jung, that fantastic old fantasy novel.
Yes.
He's translated this with Yoosup Chang, but unfortunately there's nothing out there as to what Yoosup Chang is doing right now. So apologies. But yes, they are a fantastic duo for this translation. They've done a brilliant job.
Oh, I do want to check out some of his works. I'm on his Wikipedia page for Heinz, Insu, Fenkl, not for Yoosup Chang. I'm sure you would have scoured Wikipedia for the information. Memories of My Ghost Brother. That sounds like an interesting tale.
That's one of his own novels rather than a translation.
Yeah, and then an edited volume he did, Century of the Tiger, 100 Years of Korean Culture in America, which would be interesting. Anyway, maybe in the future. But today, focusing on this plot by Yi Mun-yol, where do we start the story?
Well, we're going to start with the situation where he's been trying to meet his father, but things haven't worked out. And so there's a suggestion about what if he meets his brother instead. Kim is worried sick because he knows he has to pay you back. But do you think it can be done? $3,000. In Yanji, you need to sell your house to get that kind of money. So I was thinking, your father is already gone. But how would you like to meet a brother of yours instead? It seems you have a couple over there. I honestly did not even hear what Ryu was suggesting. All the love and hate, all the longing and resentment pent up inside me for half a century suddenly went up in smoke, leaving me entirely empty. My emotions were no longer as violent as when I was young, but still, the object of my longing and hatred, who still appeared to me constantly in different guises, leaving this world so pathetically. I'd been anxious to meet my father because he was getting old, approaching 80, and yet the sudden news of his death made it seem unreal and absurd. My last memory of him was as a young man still in his mid-30s. After leaving Professor Ryu without making any sort of commitment, all I could think of on my way home was my father's death. Should I tell my mother? What traditional funerary ceremony should I perform in this situation? There were many pressing decisions I had to make. In the late 80s, when my mother learned that my father had sired 5 children with his second wife in the north, she never mentioned him again, not even once. To my mother, who was beyond the slightest reproach, raising 3 children on her own and staying faithful to my father all those years, this evidence of his fertility amounted to a great betrayal. What would news of his death mean to her now?
So I was a bit confused. This setting is South Korea, is it?
Yeah, well, he's in China right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, at this part in the story.
Oh.
He's from South Korea. He's traveled to China in the hopes of getting a meeting with his father. But
Who had gone to North Korea?
Yes, but his father has died.
Oh, dear. And so there's this character, Professor Liu, who knows his father.
Well, he knows a guy who can help, Mr. Kim, a fixer.
Oh, right.
Yes.
And then he's trying to now arrange and suggesting, well, now that your father's gone, you could meet some brothers that you have.
Exactly,
instead.
because Mr. Kim has already taken the money and he won't be able to pay it back.
Oh, my goodness. So is this, like you said, it's got some autobiographical elements. Is it a true story, this part, about meeting brothers?
No.
Oh.
The autobiographical element is the fact that his father ran away to the north.
Okay.
So I think it's him processing what it might be like if he had that chance to meet a sibling.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, even the main character is called Professor Lee.
Oh, okay.
So it's him.
It's just,
It is him in this imagined story, but
it's not
just
hidden or anything.
no. It's like an alternate reality in some
Wow.
ways.
And you really felt like what the character was feeling about being violent as a child, having those two emotions of longing for his father, but also hatred of his father as well.
Yeah.
And talking about remembering his father in his like mid-30s and whatnot. So
Yes.
he does have memories of him. And then he fled and left them behind, it seems.
I know it's a tragic start to the story, but it's a fascinating insight because I'm thinking Yi Mun-yol is not the only one who suffered through this kind of incident.
Sure. I guess in some cases, maybe the whole family would flee to North Korea back in those days, but maybe logistically that was tough. So perhaps maybe men went first, maybe thinking they'd come back for their family.
Well, in this case, yes, the father was like, look, I've got to go up north, but I'll be back for you.
Oh.
And yet he never came back.
Oh, how tragic.
Yes, so it's 1993, and as I said, he's been trying to get in touch with his father. So the father left during the Korean War, and so the professor has gone to the Chinese border between China and North Korea, and he goes there with Professor Liu, and he looks over at North Korea, and he weeps, and he confesses to Professor Liu, I'm never going to get to see my father again.
Yes.
And Liu is like, hold on, I know someone. I know Mr. Kim. Mr. Kim has a wife who is North Korean, who's living in China, but has family connections back in North Korea.
Oh, okay.
And so if you pay him, he will arrange a meeting. The thing is, the South Korean security services already warned Professor Lee, don't do this.
Oh,
this is
okay.
very dangerous. This could cause all sort of trouble. But he does do it. And he gives the money and he goes back to South Korea and he waits for a message. And then months later, he finds out from Professor Liu that Mr. Kim has been too ashamed to tell him that his father has died.
Oh.
So the meeting can't happen, but he does have brothers in North Korea. So what about meeting a brother, as we heard in that segment before?
Yeah.
So he agrees. He receives a coded message telling him to come to China, come back to that North Korean border,
Yeah.
and he goes there. And at first, the brother does not turn up.
Oh.
He's meant to arrive and he doesn't. And so he's stuck in this hotel on the border of China and North Korea, sort of waiting around. And he talks to people.
To other South Koreans. then?
Yeah, there are other South Koreans there, supposedly for tourist reasons, but in fact, well, one's a businessman, another is looking for reunification.
Oh.
And he talks to the businessman who's staying in the same room as Mr. Reunification, who's a little bit full on, a little
Wow.
bit crazy. And they talk about him, they talk about what he's like, and they also sort of cynically talk about reunification. It's not going to happen. It's, it's too much. It's going to be too difficult. And so he's stuck there. He wanders about town. He tries to find somewhere to have lunch, and he ends up at a place called Han River,
Oh,
which is
interesting.
like a Seoul cafe. And inside, it looks just like Seoul.
Wow.
The proprietor even speaks with a Seoul accent.
Nice.
And he gets chatting to her. And she lived in Seoul for a couple of years. She saved money to open this place that's going to go bankrupt soon because they don't have any customers.
Oh, dear.
And she talks about how she hated her time in Seoul. How she and her husband did the worst jobs, the dirtiest work, and how she was harassed, and how they didn't get paid properly, and how she will never ever go back.
Is she a South Korean? Do we learn? Or we're not
No,
sure?
she's a Chinese Korean.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. And so he has these really fascinating conversations, really real, it seems, like he's documenting these conversations he's perhaps had in real life. And then, late that night, he gets a call from Mr. Kim. His brother has arrived, so they're going to meet. And he thinks back to when his father left, how his father promised he would come back and never would. And the next morning, well, he meets his brother. There's a 10-year age gap between them, and it's all a bit tense.
Yeah.
Because they talk about his father's death, and then they talk about memorial ceremonies and who should perform them.
Oh.
And they both think that they're the legitimate son, so therefore they should be the one to do it. And then he gets upset because he sees a photo of this other family. He finds out about his father's second wife, and he finds out about his half-siblings. And it's really difficult. It's really tense. There's distrust because it's North and South against each other, and it's family against family. But the professor, he finally manages to sort of confess his feelings and confess how difficult it's been for him, and they start to bond.
Oh, that's good.
They have a beer together, and the brother tells him, you drink just like our father. You have the same look on your face. And he gives him this medal. Now, this medal was given to his father for his work, and it was the most treasured possession of his father. And the family didn't want him to give it to Professor Lee, but he does.
Oh.
And it's time to go. He's gonna go now. But the professor says, "Hold on, come with me to the banks of the Tumen River.
Yeah.
This is the border river between China and North Korea.
Sure.
Come with me, and we will perform a mangje, which is this sort of mourning from afar ceremony.
Oh.
Like when your loved one is in another country and has passed away there."
Yes.
So they do, and it's a really intimate moment. And finally, the professor is able to properly mourn. But he's not just mourning for his father, he's also mourning for his family's suffering after they were abandoned. And it brings him closer to this half-brother, this brother he never knew. It feels like the connection of family is growing stronger.
Oh, what an interesting family situation. Let's get to our second reading.
I know about Pine Valley too, and Stone Creek, and Red Screen Mountain, and the place for watching fish. He went on, as if he'd been all over my hometown. My heart was stung again as I saw in my brother, father's 40 years of intense homesickness. Even then, I was still keeping score, not to be outdone in this exchange of sentimentality, and I replied a little too quickly, "Is Chongjin still that cold and windy? They called it sand winds. I think that the cold wind that makes your bone marrow ache. And is there still a field of gravel that stretches for 10 li? And the smoke and dust spewing from the Kimchek iron foundry? How do you know about those places?" "It's the place where father and you all live. How could I not be interested? I know about Two Swallows Mountain, Camel Mountain, and Moving Castle Creek too." My brother looked as if he were about to take my hands and burst into tears. I had been calculating, not malicious, but seeing him respond so innocently made me feel guilty, and I became careful about what I said. The fact that we shed tears together, bowing side by side in front of Father's spirit, though from afar, greatly lessened my initial urgency. Until that moment, I'd been in a near manic rush to learn about my brother. It was the pressure of our first meeting that made me more calculating and talkative than usual. But now I felt content, and I let my brother carry the conversation. I didn't think he was much of a talker, but between all the alcohol and our brotherly intimacy, he was able to ask, one by one, questions he must have been suppressing all along.
Oh, so they know a bit about each other's hometowns where they've lived, and that seems to be bringing them closer. Although we get a glimpse into the professor initially, as he said, being calculating, not malicious, but still calculating.
Yeah, and this is what their relationship is. Half of it is open and honest and trusting, and half of it is guarded and suspicious and tense. And this is what makes it so good, because Yi Mun-yol really gets into his own mind, but also into the mind of his brother.
Sure, and so they appear through this ceremony this morning to have kind of really bonded, maybe got to a certain part of the relationship.
Yeah, it really does seem that way, going from complete strangers to maybe being family, sort of.
Yes.
And his brother then, he goes on to ask him about the truth about South Korea. Because he's heard all the propaganda in North Korea, and he wants to know the truth. And they start to talk about their lives, their countries more honestly, but then tensions still rise, and then it's time to go back to Yanji. And the professor is going to leave in the morning, and he says, "Will you meet me one more time?" The brother says, I'll try. And they say goodbye, and they sort of like, they're going, we'll see each other soon. Reunification is going to come. And they both know it won't. and he wants to give his brother an envelope full of dollars as he leaves, but he doesn't. He holds back. And they send greetings to each other's family. And instead of saying, send greetings to your mother, they drop the modifier and say, send greetings to mother.
Oh.
So they're family now.
They're linked, yeah.
Yeah, and then he gets back to the hotel. He meets Mr. Reunification,
Yes.
Who forces him to have a drink. And they talk about what's going on. They talk about the guy he met before, the businessman, who turns out to be an art smuggler. Smuggling ancient Korean art from North Korea to sell back in Insadong.
Goodness.
And they talk about reunification, but this time, instead of it being cynical, it's filled with a little more hope, a little more anger. So it's sort of the opposite, the complete opposite of the chat he's had before.
Things have changed.
Yeah. And then, Mr. Kim comes to get paid and tells him, I don't think your brother's going to come back. I think it's going to be too tough.
Oh, dear.
But he does. In the evening, he's banging on the door, drunk as a skunk.
Oh, dear.
And tells him, I've got more to say to you. And he confesses his feelings, he confesses his failures, he confesses about his relationship with his father, how the family down south were like an invisible curse to them.
Oh, wow.
And so finally we get to the point where we're going, both families have suffered in the same way.
He just had all this stuff that maybe he was holding back, the half-brother, and he just had to spill it all out.
Welcome to Arirang Radio.
If you are in Jeju,
88.7 in Jeju City.
88.1 in Seogwipo City.
101.9 in the Daejeong area.
Arirang Radio.
Do you know what I was thinking when I left to come here? Frankly, it had nothing to do with Father's dying wish. That only made me strangely jealous. Why did he want me to give you the highest award he ever received? What were you to us anyway? I came here because I was curious about you, not to carry out Father's last request. I couldn't resist coming to see what our long curse looked like in person. No, it was more than that. It was like setting out to find my lifelong nemesis. But the instant I laid eyes on you, that wasn't it. I can't really explain it, but from the moment we met, you weren't my nemesis. You were just my brother. I mean, you're someone to embrace, to cry with, not someone to curse and hate. I mean, as time went by, all the hatred I brought with me turned into shame. I even had the illusion that you were someone I had missed for such a long time. So what happened here? Tell me, where can you go to satisfy your lifelong grudge? And where can we go to satisfy ours? Something went wrong here. What happened? Can you tell me, brother? What really happened here? I don't know either, brother. The truth is, I share the futility and emptiness you feel. They were in the tears I shed by the Tumen River. All I know is that an era has passed, that the time has come for me to find some way to change my view of life. I am beginning to feel that though life may be full of cruelty and suffering, I cannot pass on the blame for any of it to anyone else.
Oh, it's really raw, really real, really touching. And this, I assume, is the first time and the last times that they're going to meet, I guess. Separated forever?
Yeah, this is it. So his brother confesses all. He tells him the truth about the family, about what they're really doing. Mm-hmm. He'd sort of bigged them up.
Okay.
Lied a little bit. And he even tells him that he's got a half-sister living in Beijing.
Oh.
Yeah. So
escaped North Korea.
Yeah, she's there with her husband. So finally, the drunken North Korean brother goes to sleep. The professor remains awake thinking, and in the morning, he gives his brother the envelope of cash, and they say goodbye.
Oh.
And he gets to Beijing, and he calls his half-sister.
Oh, the professor.
Yeah, but she pretends she's someone else and tells him she's out. But he figures it out, and he gives her a message of how to meet him if she wants.
Yeah.
And there's a quaver in her voice as she tells him, have a good trip.
Oh.
But she never shows up at the meeting place.
Oh, they don't get to meet.
Yeah, and so he goes to the airport. The art smuggler asks him to carry 2 scrolls for him. He agrees.
Wow.
And he heads onto the plane and heads back home.
Goodness gracious. He gets caught up in all that malarkey as well.
Yeah.
And we don't hear anything else. That's the end.
No, that's the end. That's the end of the book. And I've got to admit, I try to always be honest when I talk about the books that we
Yes.
feature. When I first started reading it, the book was quite formal in its style of writing, and I thought, "Oh, am I going to get on with this?"
Quite hard, emotionless, maybe.
Yeah. Well, no. At the start, it seemed that way, and then, as the 2 families as we started to learn about them, you start to empathize more with Professor Lee, and I really, really got into it, and I understand why Yi Mun-yol is such a respected author.
Sure.
So this book, I really recommend it. When you first pick it up, you go, "Oh, this is a bit." It's a bit formal,
Yes.
But then when you get into it, it is brilliant. It really is, and it really sums up how hard it must be to have been separated because of the Korean War.
Sure, and then for both these families seemingly having similar emotions as well, that the other family was like, in some ways, something to be ashamed of, a curse as well,
Yeah.
and the father kind of at the center of things. You know, at the beginning when you told me this story or the plot line, I was thinking, what a terrible father, to do that. But he, it seems, was struggling the whole time, missing his hometown.
Yeah,
wanting to give that medal to his son.
He made that one choice, that one life-changing choice, and he could never go back after he did it.
Yes. I'm kind of curious, the book's premise, it's fictional in that he didn't meet his brothers.
Yeah.
Is that possible to go up there? Is it all a bit under the table and shady around that area?
Well, back in the
border with North
90s, I don't know about now, but certainly
Yeah.
there have been people who crossed the border on a regular basis who were bringing back and forth bits and pieces. So yeah, I think it could have been possible.
Yeah.
Yi Mun-yol is not a fantasist. He's not a science fiction writer.
Sure.
So I think it's based on reality. It's based on truth. Yeah, and I mean, we've seen these meetings that happen. They haven't happened for a while, but back in the early 2000s, for about a decade, every few months or so, there would be these visits, either North Koreans to South Korea or South Koreans to North Korea.
Like a formal thing, right?
Yeah, where families could meet just for the day. And that was it. But at least they got to meet.
Yeah, it was always heartbreaking watching the scenes on TV of those reunifications, right?
Yeah. And we're coming to the end of Chuseok. We're coming to the end of this holiday, which is all about families meeting. And it seems really appropriate, especially when, I can't see my family. I can't get to the UK. We can have a call on the internet, but that's about it.
In these pandemic times, it's especially fitting, isn't it?
Yeah. And so I think because my wife's father, his family was from North Korea. And so after the Korean War, they were separated from any relatives. They were down south. Everyone else was up north, and that was it.
Forever.
Yeah, and it makes me think a lot about that severed connection, about there being no way to return, about a family tree being cleaved in half, at least for now.
Yeah, and then I guess for people like us, expats, foreign workers living here in Korea, when it is Chuseok time, I think sometimes, especially if you've not got any Korean family at all, you're just here as an isolated person or family pod, you do feel that pang of missing and longing for your family.
Absolutely.
A little bit of jealousy, perhaps, as well. I was talking to a foreign friend who was like, yeah, it's nice and quiet in Seoul sometimes around Chuseok, and you like having the roads to yourself, but at the same time, you think, I wish I was at a house with my grandpa and my uncles and aunts eating good food.
Yeah, so it's maybe a time, maybe today, now that the celebrations are almost over, it's time to reach out to those people who might be alone, to give them a phone call or send them a text message and say, you doing all right? Do you want to go for a coffee, or do you want to come round, have some rice cakes?
Yeah, reach out that hand, and there will be Chuseok leftovers, so you should definitely
There's
have
always,
enough to go round.
Always Chuseok leftovers.
Yeah, it's an interesting tale as well. My wife's father's family, also from North Korea. I don't think we have the same wife. I'm pretty confident about that.
Well, my wife is normally at my house.
Yes,
so.
And my wife is normally at mine. But it was really interesting because my wife's grandma was alive until recently. And,
Yeah.
you know, she has obviously full memories of coming down from
Of
North
course.
Korea, actually carrying a baby that was my father-in-law, who doesn't have any recollections, you know. So now that she passed away a couple of months back, I think that's the final real kind of vivid memories of the North. And in a way, it's kind of a bit of closure there, because although my father was born in North Korea, he doesn't have any family that he remembers or recalls that he couldn't see. Oh, one interesting tale. And I don't know, that kind of whole issue has kind of disappeared a little bit, the two Koreas and reunification talk. Hopefully it can come back to being a reality in the future. As always, Paul, thank you for coming in with your beautiful reading.
Oh, thanks as always to the Literature Translation Institute of Korea for their help with copyright permission for this broadcast. Thank you to Yi Mun-yol for his excellent story, and to Heinz, Insu, Fenkl with Yoosup, Chang for their great translation. I'll be back again next week with another book.
You can listen to Check It Out with Paul Matthews on Arirang Radio's #DailyK every Wednesday from 10 a.m. KST.